Good afternoon, everybody. We are getting back into match mode. Back to Carrow Road tomorrow night. Norwich City against Aston Villa. Almost a little bit of a championship feel to it. 2 games in 4 days, which is good, which is what we like because there's too many of those long gaps in the Premier League, aren't there? But Pad, if we get straight into it, and the one boost that we were sort of hoping to hear that we haven't heard was that Matthias Norman would come back in, but still a bit too soon for him.
Yes, mate. Yeah, I've just got the list there because there's 1 or 2, isn't there, from Dean's presser this morning. Yeah, start right there. Matthias Norman, ongoing pelvic issue, specifically a torn ligament in his pelvis, which he's been playing with. Well, I don't think we know exactly when he had that, but he certainly had it for the majority because he was getting injection therapy as far back as the Burnley game earlier in the season. But missed the last 2 games, is it now, or is it 3? I can't remember, but he's certainly unavailable for tomorrow. And that's obviously another blow because Dean Smith kind of indicated prior to the weekend that they hoped he would be able to sort of train on over the weekend and then come back in. That hasn't proved to be the case. And as a result, no Matthias Norman for tomorrow night. And I don't think we really got a timeline in terms of when. I mean, I think a bit later in the presser, actually, Dean said, quite openly admitted that, it's not the timescale they thought it would be. So they're obviously a little bit concerned that physically his body isn't there yet, that he would be able to sort of come back into the mix. We hope that changes in the days ahead. Probably the main one from Saturday's game is obviously the big captain, Grant Hanley, fell over very, very heavily on his left shoulder, left elbow. And the prognosis on that, well, good in the sense it's not dislocated. There's no fracture. Dean Smith confirmed today. Bad in the sense his left arm is in a sling for the next 10 days. And he needs a scan to assess the extent of the ligament damage. So it's very hard to sort of foresee him being available. Well, I know he'll want to be out there, but, 10 days takes you kind of almost into the start of that festive swing with the Boxing Day game and Arsenal at Carrow Road. I think it might be the new year now, if even they get a positive update on the scans. But for tomorrow, Dean Smith confirming no Grant Hanley, which then begs the question, well, where are we with Ben Gibson and Andrew Bamadelli? 2 of those missed out against Manchester United. Ben Gibson, we spoke to Dean early on Monday morning. They were going to train thereafter. Gibson was planning to train. If he comes through that, no problem at all. He had a tight thigh, which ruled him out of the United game. But if he comes through that, no problems, he'll be available. So that's one bit of good news. Bamadelli, I think he said a stress fracture in his lower back. I think he put a 2-week timeline on that from here. So much like Hanley, I don't think we'll be seeing him over the festive period, which will place another huge onus on certainly Kabak and also now Jakob Sorensen, given what he did against Manchester United. So the only other strands, injury and fitness-wise, to tie up are really Zolis, we knew about, COVID positive, self-isolating at home. Dean Smith wasn't 100% sure on the protocols now in terms of the different variants, and if you return negative tests, can you shorten that period? I think he mentioned 10 days, but he wasn't 100% sure. But certainly for tomorrow night, no Jolis. And Zimmerman, we know longer term, coming back from ankle surgery. He said he's not even doing any outdoor running yet. So that gives you an idea of the steps that he's still on and has to take. But one very good piece of news, Mio Rashica, groin issue, was going to be likely 3 or 4 weeks. He's apparently already out and doing some work outside. And Dean Smith even was prepared to admit, if that all goes to plan, Arsenal Boxing Day is the target. Yeah. So Rashica maybe for Arsenal. But in terms of tomorrow night, yeah, he's definitely going to have to dip into that bag of tricks again and find some solutions, particularly at centre back. No Hanley, no Bamadelli, no Zimmerman. So hopefully Gibson comes back in. But other than that, no other, thankfully, issues relating to Saturday's game other than the big man, Big Grant.
Yeah, well, the sooner Rashica's back, the better. But yeah, there's some concerning little bits and pieces of that. And I think we've all got this niggling concern with Norman as well, haven't we? That it's a pretty serious problem that he's got. And if they haven't gone down the surgery route at this point, if they then end up having to go down that in January or something, then that's going to be very frustrating. And, we've been talking so much about the lack of goal threat. That was one thing that Norman was offering, wasn't it? Rashica yet to quite reach that point. He was offering threat, wasn't he? But still hasn't opened his account for Norwich. We know he can do it. We've seen it in the Bundesliga. Scored a spectacular goal against Bayern Munich once, didn't he? So those 2 in particular, to me, seem pretty important for the goal threat. A few comments coming through as well already. Please do get them in, whether you're watching on Facebook, YouTube, or Twitter. Dan Mayhew agreeing with my opening.
Yeah, sorry, I was just going to cut across here. I just seen one of the comments. Will, I don't know if you want to punch that one in, Dave, as you're punching them in, but we can answer that. No is the answer. So there's no issue with Dimmy. I think maybe when Jolis first came over, obviously the connection in terms of both know each other very well from Greek football circles. He may well have spent some time, but I think Dimmy's over here with his girlfriend. And actually, but on that specific point, I did check that in the last few days, and no, they don't live together. Hence why Dimmy's available and Christos isn't.
Yeah, I think Jolis was staying with him when he first arrived, didn't he? And that basically people have remembered that because I think there were some pictures on Insta and things, weren't there? And people have presumed that that's still the case, but no. Martin Power, Kabak was awesome, so must be considered moving forward. Yeah, and we talked about that at length in the Pink and podcast. He was my man of the match. I think we both gave him an 8 out of 10 in our individual ratings, didn't we, Pad? So we go into this one against a Villa team who are trying to find their groove under Steven Gerrard. But I've got the table in front of me here. They've scored 21 goals to Norwich's 8. So they've got Ollie Watkins. Danny Ings is fit again, isn't he? Although they've been struggling to get him fully fit. Emi Buendia, of course. They've got some serious assets. Leon Bailey, the Traore as well. Can't remember his first name. But they have got some serious attacking threats. But I think we can pretty certainly say, as we sit here, it's going to be Kabak and Sorensen in central defence, isn't it?
Well, I mean, obviously, if Gibson comes through unscathed, I don't know. I wouldn't necessarily rule Gibson out, having only missed the one game prior to that. Of course, he was pretty much playing every game under Dean Smith. He offers you that left-sided balance. I've seen some stats this morning actually about his carries, bringing it out of defence and connecting the dots in terms of the players in front. So I don't know. I don't know what that would say to Ben Gibson necessarily if Dean Smith turned around and said, I'm going to go with Jakob Sorensen and Kabak. I don't think that would go down too well in terms of one of the leaders in the group as well. So for me, if he proves his fitness definitively, today, tomorrow, and he's available, I think he probably looks to bring in Ben Gibson, and you think that would be alongside Kabak. But Jakob Sorensen, he's catapulted himself firmly into the mix now, given how assured he looked. And I did see a very good point, that we all know he has been recruited as a central defender, a central midfielder. He did a passable impression of a central defender at the weekend, but a holding central midfielder. And Lys Malou hasn't ripped up any trees for me. Rupp was good again, but he can go hot, he can go cold. For me, Sorensen, he's got to be in the debate now, whereas before it was, if there's a few injuries on the bench, he might make a squad. Now, can he push? Because he looked comfortable, didn't he? He looked composed. And he looked like he had time on the ball, and that's always a good sign of a player. So for me now, if it isn't to be centre back tomorrow, and I'm not then advocating that he goes straight in at centre midfield, but he has to be part of the conversation now, along with McLean, Gilmour, Rupp, Lys Malou, and hopefully with Norman when he's fit.
Yeah, well, there's one comment that says it. So, I mean, as long as Gibson's available for the squad, the one thing that is different from when Daniel Farke was in charge is that Dean has done his press conference before the training session, isn't it? So we almost haven't quite got the most up-to-date team news as it used to be. So we'll have to see how it goes. But as long as Gibson's available for the squad, then that's good. But yes, I suppose that if he's maybe 90% fit, then you'd probably go with him ahead of Sorensen at the back just because of his experience. And he has been in a good seam of form recently as well, hasn't he? But yeah, Sorensen, I mean, it is different being at centre back. We often, if you look at the stats, you always see, Hanley and Gibson, for instance, have among the most touches, the most completed passes, things like that. That's kind of how Norwich play. That's how modern football is. So if you're in that anchor role, then you don't get as much time on the ball, do you, as we've seen with Billy Gilmour. But I was saying it again on Saturday during the game that I prefer Gilmour on the right of that midfield three rather than being the deepest of it, because I want to see him on the half turn, making the progressive passes, trying to make things happen rather than just being, the sort of Tom Tribal enabler with the sideways passing and just keeping everything flowing. I think he's got more to his game than that. And I think Sorensen is so comfortable in possession and he's got the size and athleticism on his side as well, that it just feels like he's suited. But how many times have we had these sort of conversations with him, but also with Godfrey as well? I've seen there's quite a few people who would like to see Kabak long-term tried in there as well. But it is a very different demand, isn't it? The centre-back passing to that anchor passing.
Yeah, you're right. The game's more in front of you. You probably do in the terms of how Norwich want to build the play. less so to a philosophical element under Smith than Farker, but still, it's not Tim Krul getting the ball and old school sort of launching it, hit and hope for Buki to play off second ball. So, yeah, but I think what's changed with Sorensen now is, before it was, well, he was recruited for this. We haven't seen him. Could he do that? We've now seen him in a Premier League environment. And I don't mean a little cameo at Tottenham. He went in there 20 minutes gone against Ronaldo and Rashford. And there was one or two when he got isolated against Rashford's pace in the second half, you feared, and he was kind of, his body position wasn't right. And you could see he's not a natural central defender. But there was a lot more positives, and his work on the ball, some of the, the diagonals he was slipping out to Yanulis particularly, real touch of quality about him, and it's his temperament. He just looked super cool, no issues at all. Yeah, I'll go on in that scenario, and I'll take it in my stride. So you know now that his temperament is good enough for the Premier League. Whether his talent is good enough, he'll need a run of games in his preferred position. But I just think now after the weekend, he's now in the conversation, whereas before it was, well, he's a passenger in the squad, let's be honest. And then probably in January, if he's not getting any football, does he go out on loan? I think now, if he can maintain those levels when he gets some first team Premier League football, then you can't discount him because he looked comfortable. And, for me, I think probably, Elise Malou, he doesn't look comfortable yet. Every time I see him in a Premier League environment, it looks like it's passing him by too much. And for me, so if Elise Malou is in the mix when we discuss central midfielders, then Jakob Sorensen has to be, surely.
Yeah. And we can't really avoid COVID stuff as well. Fortunately, that was kind of the other thing, wasn't it, that we were bracing for? Are there going to be more positive tests on top of Jolis? Because Man United have had a couple since they've got back to Manchester, although that's apparently not the group that travelled to and from Norfolk. Villa have had a couple as well. Mark Davis asks, will Villa have players missing re-COVID? Do we know? Their presser, I think, it was 1:30, wasn't it, Pat?
1:30, yeah. 1:30.
So we'll find out shortly. Basically, after we've done this, that'll be next on my to-do list to see what's going on over at Villa. Stephen Gerrard's press conference. Dan Mayhew, winky face is important here. The question is, have the players had a Christmas party? That came from Talk Sports, didn't it? And then Dean Smith almost caused a bit of confusion, and then
that was painful. Yeah, we won't name the publication, but one of the national journos didn't quite get it in his head that Dean Smith was joking when he talked. He's obviously playing on.
Been told 3 times.
Yeah, a certain individual who doesn't brush his hair very often, who hosted a quiz at a certain location in London, which has caused a bit of furore. I think we all know what I'm talking about. Dean Smith more or less indicated that their Christmas party would be, I don't even know if he said quiz, but it'd be kind of a virtual, there'd be only 2 people in the room. And it was very clear that was a joke all bar one individual who was on that call this morning, who just wanted to ascertain what they did at this virtual party and couldn't understand that, no, there wasn't a virtual party. It was Dean Smith putting a bit of a joke out there. So
to be fair, I didn't think it was clear it was a joke to start with. I felt like he backtracked a bit. But the guy you're talking about, Smith had told him straight away, didn't he? He's like, no, it was a joke. But he still didn't get it, did he?
No, he still didn't get it. No, well, he got it when he told him it was a joke. But that was after about the 4th question about that he actually thought he had a quiz in a virtual setting. So anyway, we digress. But to answer the question, I don't think there'll be any Christmas parties anywhere at any football club from the way things are going. And as you mapped out there, the last week alone, Tottenham, Norwich's previous opponents, COVID cases. Yeah. Manchester United, their most recent COVID cases, and Villa, their next COVID cases, reportedly over the weekend, albeit a lot of the Villa reports were around staff at Bodymoor Heath, their training ground, rather than actual players. I think in that report, there was one player who potentially may have tested positive. But as you say, Stephen Gerrard will bring us up to date within the hour. But in the current climate, and then obviously what's happening with society at large and renewed kind of possible restrictions coming in, and now a huge push to get all booster jabs, which Dean Smith let us know that he's had his booster jab this morning. So no, I don't think any professional football club will be taking the risk of having a Christmas party.
No, that reminded me. I need to try and get it booked because it wasn't opened up to everyone until today, was it? So, yes, as we all do, to try and fight off this variant. But we won't get too much into COVID. We're all sick of that. It's just basically they're back on high alert. They're doing everything they can to try and avoid it. But questions about Christmas parties to me seem a bit irrelevant when you're playing in front of 27,000 people at matches, and you're in crowded dressing rooms and things like that. Anyway. Andre J says Sorensen always gives 110%. Thomas Rudland, Sorensen has to play as a central defensive midfielder and Gilmour play higher up the pitch. So, yeah, agreeing with what we were saying a little while ago. Craig Crowther asked, should Sorensen play as part of the back three? I guess maybe long term. We did see that in pre-season a little bit, didn't we? And we wondered if that was something that was more to come because that kind of suits him quite nicely. But at the moment, it's just about having enough fit bodies to actually consider that. I don't think we'll see that against Villa tomorrow night, but maybe long term, we shall see. The next stage, once Norman's back, Andrew J says, full Scandinavian central defensive midfield, Svens, Sorensen and Norman. So that, if you were to go back to a 4-2-3-1, I suppose you'd have to for that, Pad. That does sound like it's got quite a nice balance to it, doesn't it?
Yeah, it'd be an interesting one. Yeah, I wouldn't be averse to having a look at that. I mean, he wouldn't play because he's obviously one of the frontline options, but you've got Charlton in the FA Cup. So, broader speaking, there's a little bit of an experimentation that Dean Smith can do, while, of course, I'm sure making it clear they want to get through against Charlton and into the next round. But I don't think you'd be experimenting with Norman. I think Norman, certainly with the way his body is at the minute, another game probably wouldn't be the best scenario there. But yeah, and then the question would be then who would be in the three ahead? I mean, who would you go with the three if they were you two?
Well, I suppose that's then. I wrote this in the 6 Things today about Cantwell and Dowell are kind of on the edge now, aren't they? Where they've seen Porretta come into the team ahead of them because they're not really wingers. Okay, Cantwell could get away with it in the Championship, but really they're both a number 10, aren't they? They're your classic playmaker. So if you were in a 4-2-3-1, then bang, those boys can come straight back into it. I think Gilmour could do a job as a 10 in the Premier League, although that's probably not where he wants to be long term. And then they've got the options. As long as Rashica is back, then he's going to be one of the wingers, and probably Jolis if he can find his rhythm. But you can understand Sargent playing at the moment, can't you? We did have there was a comment, I think, about Sargent, which I can't spot now. But there it is, Martin Power. Still think we need another striker as Sargent suits being a winger, in my opinion. Do we have enough of a goal threat to stay up if both Norman and Rashica are fit again too? So that flows into that. And I think as we sit here today, Pad, I don't know if you agree with me, I think Sargent will be in the starting 11 again tomorrow in the hope that he's doing the basics, isn't he? He's doing everything that the manager would want in terms of work rate, defensive cover, and how hard he tries, and almost a bit of physicality as well. He can get up in the air for things. And I guess if you're Dean Smith, you just hope that if you keep playing him and he can play himself into a bit of form and, hopefully, remember the goal he scored against Bournemouth where he basically knew very little about it. That's the one he sort of needs again now in the Premier League, isn't it?
He's not the only one. 1 goal in 4 games now under Smith. And it isn't for want of trying. And again, that point was put to Dean Smith earlier, and you quite rightly pointed out, well, you played Tottenham and you played Manchester United, and Tottenham, they had chances and Tottenham took theirs and Norwich didn't. And then Manchester United, by common consent, overall man of the match, you're hard pressed to look beyond David De Gea. So if United's keeper is the man of the match, then Norwich have certainly been knocking at the door. Sargent, yeah, I think he looks at Sargent at the minute, and within what he's trying to achieve, which is almost certainly at Carrow Road, is that swarming, collective, high intensity, really high energy. Sargent gives you those things, and maybe as a result, it frees up Pookie to maybe find a little bit more space, or other players to get in and around in higher starting positions. And so it's what Sargent does as unlocking the team performance ultimately, I think, because if you just stripped all that away and looked at a guy who'd been recruited as a striker, and we got into this in depth in last night's Monday Night Club on the app, but then he doesn't warrant a place in the 11 because both at Norwich and as a career so far, which is still very much in its infancy, he's not a goal scorer, certainly not prolific goal scorer. So he wouldn't merit a place in the side purely on that criteria. But if you looked at what he offered in general play and how that maybe connected to the overall team performance against United, I think he does merit retaining his place in the lineup for Villa.
I feel like those two wide players, if you're going to play 4-3-3, they've got to offer a long range goal threat. They've got to at least be having a pop. And that's where Rashica was starting to come into his own. And if Porretta is to get another chance, it's all good getting to the byline and putting in crosses, but that's not desperately what Pukki wants most of the time. He's also, if you're going to play those inverted wingers with Sargent on the left and him on the right, he's got to be coming inside and having some pops at goal. And when he arrived as well, it seems a while ago now, doesn't it? But when they signed him from the Poda side, slash Rockler, wasn't it? He had a pretty decent YouTube supercut of goals that he'd scored from range. So he's obviously been for a pretty strange time of it in 2021, really, after a fairly bright start to his Norwich career. Those two wide players, and that's why, as I said a little while ago, I think long term, hopefully, it would be Rashica and Jolis to really offer that bit of threat from range. Because if you look across the Premier League to those sort of wide attackers, that's what you need to get. So yeah, Porretta, do you think you start again? I mean, I don't think Cantwell did enough, to be honest, and I don't think Dowell will come in. I think that Smith almost is looking at Porretta as more his kind of player for this kind of system.
Yeah, there's another point there from Porretta or from Ollie. Does he offer something a little bit different? And he does, doesn't he? I mean, that was some sort of elevation back to the 11, because I checked back and his actual last start for Norwich in the league was, I think, way back in February. Yeah, he was unfortunately one of those in the summer who had COVID, and by all accounts, symptoms wise, he took him a fair degree of time to get through that. So maybe it's only now that he's starting to show that he can offer something. And again, the Norwich fans loved what they saw from Porretta. He got a sustained ovation when they made that change in the second half, and he walked off the pitch behind the goal by the Barclay, and he had to come all the way along the Barclay and then along the City stand. And we're sat in the City stand and all the way round. And you'd say, well, of course they'd applaud the Norwich players, they walk round, but I think there was a genuine recognition that he had maybe surprised a few in terms of what he offered. Inevitably, he's going to tire when he hasn't played for that length of time. I thought there was some decent glimpses of quality. There was one or two link-ups. There was one with McLean down the right-hand side, and he got to the advanced position. He came back inside, and instead of just an aimless ball curled into the box, he saw Rupp and chipped a lovely ball, went over two United players, and it was perfect. And then Rupp tried to help it into Pukki, and Pukki didn't quite anticipate it, or it was just slightly behind him. But that was the sort of quality that I don't think we've seen huge amounts of, because we simply haven't really seen a lot of Porretta for whatever reason. And yeah, I was surprised that he got the nod, but maybe it was a degree of needs must. But as Dean Smith said, when he looked at the United lineup and it was that kind of 4-2-2-2 formation, that the opportunities to probe were in wide areas. You could get overloads in wide areas, and clearly Porretta as a wide option could give you that linking with Aarons, as he did down the right hand side. Villa, it might be a different kettle of fish. It will be a different kettle of fish in terms of how Gerrard sets them up tomorrow night. So whether he goes again, given he hasn't had a lot of football, personally, no. I think probably he comes out tomorrow night, and whether it's Cantwell goes in a slightly different shape or not, or Dowell, time will tell. But I think that might be quite a tall order to go again with Porretta, given so little football. But certainly in terms of performance level, like with Sorensen, yeah, that was a step forward. And that was, for me, the first sign that maybe he could influence a game at Premier League level. And it might be off the bench in a cameo towards the end. But, whereas before you'd have disregarded him and thought, well, no, he's basically one of those who's very, very much on the periphery and might make the odd matchday squad. You'd probably see him at Charlton again in that FA Cup tie. Now, who knows? And that's brilliant from Dean Smith's perspective, that there is real depth in the squad. It isn't just 11 players, 13 players, and then, oh my God, what if we get an injury to a key player? They're being tested now, very much so. And Manchester United, the very last game, showed that there is quality below the frontline options. And that is something that they're going to need, because, it feels like we're in a phase, hopefully not, but, with the increasing prevalence maybe of this variant again, that you may be having players unavailable as we swing into sort of January, February. And if that's the case, you're going to need lads like Sorensen and Porretta to step up.
Yeah, I think while you're talking now, I've probably persuaded myself that I'd play Dowell on the right if you're going to have the inverted wingers, because he's got the left foot, isn't he? He can hit them from range. We have seen it. That goal he scored at Forest earlier this year. But him and Cantwell have both got to find another gear. They're both not offering enough so far. They're not. I know it's not easy for them because they're not able to get into their rhythm. But yeah, I think Porretta, it's probably going to be a big ask of him to start again. There was another moment in the second half, wasn't there, before United had scored, when they were pushing forward a bit more, and there was a lovely counter, and Porretta was in so much space, wasn't he? And Pukki sort of shanked the pass across to him, and then he had to chase after it. He would have been clean through on goal with just David De Gea to beat, and he could have ended up being the hero. Neil Luther asks, what's the vaccination status of the Norwich squad? Smith repeated again today that they have very high levels of vaccination in the squad. Obviously, it's sort of private details. They don't list it. He hasn't even really been comfortable with saying specifically that Jolis has got COVID, has he? So, that doesn't seem to be a problem at Norwich. And again, as we said earlier, Smith said that he'd had his booster and that he was totally supportive of vaccinations and all that sort of stuff. Martin Power, will Smith celebrate if we beat Villa? And that was quite a big theme of it. Obviously, wasn't it, Pad, talking about his Villa links, and they're unavoidable, aren't they?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, we all know the backstory now. He's dyed in the wool, claret and blue. His family are. And his son is as well, by the sound of it, because there was a nice anecdote about his son, who he actually, if you recall, at the period between losing his job at Villa, getting the job at Norwich, he was actually out in New York seeing his son, who's out there playing college football, I think, and his son's now back, presumably for Christmas. And Dean Smith announced that his son said he was off to watch Villa Liverpool at the weekend rather than come and see his old man against Man United. So that's how much of a Villa fan he is. But he did say tomorrow night he will be supporting Norwich, as will the rest of the family, as will Dean Smith, because, of course, he's not going to come out and talk about revenge and how much he's hurting. As he said, what Villa means to him, his LMA statement, he stands by every word of that, he said today, how much he feels an affinity to that club. He reiterated he's a Villa fan. But ultimately, as he said, when somebody decides that you're not going to have the job here anymore, life moves on, and he's very, very thankful that Norwich gave him that opportunity to get back in as soon as they did. And as he said, in the broader picture, whether it was Villa tomorrow night, or it was Man City or Liverpool, given where Norwich are in the Premier League table, they desperately need a win, and that's his focus. And of course, why wouldn't it be? Ultimately, he's a football man. He's employed professionally for Norwich City, and any affiliations to Villa, you can be sure, will be parked at the door for the 90 plus minutes tomorrow night. And I don't doubt that for a minute. But it wouldn't be human if there wasn't a little bit of an extra edge to this game, given that, they are his club and the powers that be there decided he was no longer the man. That must have hurt, just on a human level. And I'm very, very sure that if Norwich do get a result, while it will be first and foremost all about their league status and improving that, I'm sure in a quiet moment, he'll also enjoy the satisfaction of putting one over on Villa as well.
Absolutely. And that unbeaten record that he's got as a manager, 2 wins, 3 draws with Brentford. So unbeaten in 5 against his boyhood club. He slipped that in, so he clearly wants to maintain that. It will mean a lot to him, wouldn't it? As losing at Carrow Road tomorrow night isn't going to mean Villa get relegated. I don't think any of us really expect them to be in the relegation mix, because they probably should have had more points on the board than they do already, and they've had a little bit of a disrupted start to the season, obviously, which flows into what you said there about Smith losing his job. So we shall see. We won't talk too much about Emi Buendia, because we talked about that quite a bit in the latest Pink and podcast, which we recorded Saturday night after the game. So do go and seek that out. That's available on the Pink and Plus app. If you haven't already downloaded, then please do. $1.99 a month or £20 upfront for the year. And I think we'll park it there, because we're just going to keep this one a little bit shorter, because there's such a quick turnaround between games. I think there's probably a lot of people still absorbing stuff from Saturday. So we'll keep it to about half an hour here. But just a few final comments, which I'm going to use to tee up something that we'll record in a little while. So Wells Wood, if we need to sell someone in January to bring in an attacking player or creative midfielder, who will we sell? Grumpy Grandad Yanulis, however you spell it, most definitely should keep his place. I thought he was brilliant against Man U. And Neil Luther, Brandon or Dimmy. Now that is going to be the focus of our chat on the Monday Night Club tonight, which is a new part of the Pink and Podcast offering exclusive to Pink and Plus subscribers. That will be out there this evening. We'll be recording it this afternoon. We're going to drill down into that issue that we've just teed up there. And we're starting our new quiz, which I think is going to be a little bit of fun. I'm pitting Paddy against Connor throughout the rest of this season. And
sorry to disappoint. That is Connor about today. I'm not sure.
He's not about today. He's not about today, but Adam's going to step in for him, which Adam doesn't know yet. So he's going to be Team Connor for us today. Connor's apologies that he can't make it. He's very upset because I know he wanted to be there for the launch of this quiz. But you watchers will hopefully remember the Pink and Live events that we did during lockdown and during the last year, basically, while we were all stuck at home, that we ended up with a little bit of a running theme in our halftime quiz of Paddy against Connor. So I've got a few ideas how we're going to have a bit of fun with that. But for now, that is tomorrow night's game preview. There's loads to get your teeth into at pinken.com and, of course, on the new Pink and Plus app. But for now, we will catch up with you very soon.